Did you know that a simple-looking 1985 USA 1-cent coin could hold the key to a staggering value of $13 million, and that this ordinary penny that most people would overlook in their pocket change has a story so unique, so rare, and so mysterious that collectors and historians alike are fascinated by how such a small piece of copper-plated zinc could ever be considered worth millions? And today we are diving deep into the story, the history, the minting mistakes, the possibilities of its errors, the passion of collectors, the world of numismatics, and the many factors that all collide to create this legendary status for the 1985 1-cent coin, which has been circulating quietly in the background of American economic life for decades, but in some cases carrying with it a hidden fortune that makes it one of the most talked about coins in history. And when we talk about the 1985 penny, we need to understand the context of its production, because in 1982 the United States Mint made the dramatic shift from copper pennies to copper-plated zinc pennies, which meant that while older coins had a 95% copper content, the newer ones were largely zinc with a thin copper coating, which made them cheaper to produce but also far more prone to minting errors, plating issues, die cracks, misstrikes, off-center production, double dies, and all sorts of anomalies that would create fascinating varieties that collectors hunt for. And by 1985 this system was still relatively new and still producing coins that could show significant mistakes and variations. So when we talk about 1-cent coins from this year being worth millions, we are not simply talking about a face value multiplied by myth, but instead about the market for extreme rarity, the excitement of an error coin preserved in pristine condition, and the sheer frenzy among collectors who are willing to pay astronomical prices for something that only exists in a handful of examples. And so the story of the 1985 1-cent coin valued at $13 million is not just about a random penny, but about the interplay of historical events, minting practices, collector psychology, and the way small mistakes can create treasures. And to really understand this, let's walk through some of the possibilities, because one of the most famous error types of the 1985 penny involves double dies, where the image of Lincoln or the lettering appears double due to a misalignment during the die creation process. And when such coins are struck, they can show dramatic doubling on the date, the motto, "In God We Trust," or the word "liberty," and these features make them instantly recognizable and highly valuable. But then we also have off-center strikes, where the design is shifted from its normal position, leaving a blank crescent of metal on the coin. The more dramatic the off-center strike, the more valuable it becomes, especially when the date is still visible, because it allows collectors to identify the coin's year. And another variety involves broad strikes, where the coin is struck without the collar that normally restrains it, causing it to expand unnaturally and produce an oversized penny. And then there are die cracks and cuds, where the minting die itself begins to fracture and leaves raised lines or blobs of metal on the struck coin, giving it a unique fingerprint of imperfection. And these flaws, once dismissed as ugly mistakes, are today celebrated as fascinating rarities that can skyrocket the value of a penny from 1 cent to thousands or millions. But why 13 million for a 1985 penny, you may wonder, and the answer lies in the idea that certain rare specimens might combine several errors together, might be struck on the wrong planchet, such as a dime or foreign coin blank, might have been preserved in flawless mint state condition, or might simply be so unique that it becomes a one-of-a-kind treasure that collectors bid against each other to obtain, driving the value higher and higher until it reaches the mythical multimillion-dollar range. And when we examine the history of coin collecting in America, we see that legendary auctions have time and again proven that even the most unlikely coins can fetch staggering sums when rarity, condition, and demand align, with examples like the 1943 copper penny, the 1913 Liberty nickel, and the 1804 silver dollar commanding millions. So it is not hard to imagine a 1985 1-cent coin with extraordinary traits becoming a $13 million marvel. And what adds more intrigue to the 1985 penny is the fact that millions upon millions of these were struck at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. Yet among that ocean of coins, a few rare survivors carry errors that separate them from the rest, like hidden gems waiting to be discovered in circulation, in old coin jars, in forgotten drawers, or in inherited collections, where an unsuspecting owner might think it is worth just a penny when in reality it could change their life forever. And think about the emotional thrill of someone realizing that the small coin they had ignored for decades could be the very one that history records as the $13 million penny. The disbelief, the shock, the rush to authenticate, the appearance in auction catalogs, the headlines in newspapers, the fascination among collectors worldwide, all of it contributes to the legend of this coin. And in telling this story, we see how numismatics is more than just coins. It is about history, chance, error, rarity, human passion, and the endless search for treasure in the most unlikely of places, and the 1985 1-cent coin represents that perfect storm where a small piece of everyday currency transforms into a historical artifact of immense value, and to collectors it is not just about owning a coin but about owning a piece of the story, about being connected to the rare alignment of mistakes that produced it, and about being part of the continuing saga of coin collecting where new discoveries are always possible, and the excitement never ends. And perhaps the most amazing part of the 1985 pennies legend is that even today people still search their change in the hopes of finding one of these valuable coins, proof that the dream of turning pocket change into a fortune is alive and well. So if you ever come across a 1985 penny, take a close look at it, examine its edges, its surface, its strike, its details, because you never know when you might be holding the next record-breaking treasure. And as always, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of rare coins. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more amazing tales about the hidden fortunes in everyday change, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned for more fascinating discoveries that prove history and value can hide in the smallest of places. Next. Now we are going to talk about a coin that has captured the imagination of collectors, investors, and historians alike, the 1991 cent coin from the United States, a tiny copper-plated zinc penny that on the surface looks like any ordinary coin you might find in your pocket change, but because of rare errors, unusual minting mistakes, and unique circumstances has been rumored and valued by collectors to be worth as much as $8 million, making it one of the most intriguing modern cents ever discovered. And in this journey we are going to explore not only why this particular coin became so valuable but also the errors that make it special, the historical background of the 1990 penny, the role of the US Mint during that period, how coin errors come about in general, the different varieties that exist within the 1990 cent, the psychology of collectors that drives such incredible valuations, the stories of people who stumbled across these treasures unknowingly, and the lasting cultural impact of realizing that something as small and common as a penny can be worth life-changing sums of money. So sit back as we unravel a tale of copper, zinc, mistakes, and millions that brings us into the heart of numismatics and shows how 1 cent can rewrite financial history. To begin, we need to set the stage with the broader history of the US penny and how we arrived at the 1990 issue, because coins are never created in a vacuum. Each one reflects its era, the economy, the minting process, and the technology available. And in 1982 the United States Mint made a major transition by changing the composition of the penny from nearly pure copper to copper-plated zinc due to the rising cost of copper, which made it too expensive to continue striking 1 cent coins at a loss. So by the time 1990 arrived, the Lincoln cent was firmly established as a zinc coin with just a thin layer of copper to give it the familiar reddish appearance, bearing the portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse designed by Victor David Brenner in 1909 and the Lincoln Memorial reverse introduced in 1959 to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. But 1990 was not an ordinary year for the mint because mistakes began to emerge, some subtle and some dramatic, and it is these mistakes that transformed the coin into something extraordinary and ultimately multi-million-dollar in value. One of the most famous and valuable errors from the 1990 cent is the proof cent struck without the mint mark, known as the 1990 no-S Lincoln cent. And here's where things get interesting. Normally proof coins are carefully struck at the San Francisco Mint with the S mint mark to distinguish them from regular business strike coins, but a batch of proofs in 1990 accidentally left the mint without the S mint mark entirely, making them extremely rare and highly coveted, and it is believed only a few hundred such coins escaped into collector sets before the mistake was discovered. And because proof coins are made for collectors with mirrored surfaces and sharp detail, having one missing such a crucial identifying feature is shocking, and that missing S alone skyrockets the value from mere cents to thousands or even millions depending on the coin's condition and market demand. And when coupled with the growing frenzy around error coins, stories began circulating that rare examples could be worth up to $8 million, a number that captures imaginations and headlines and inspires people to look more closely at their change jars. But the story of the 1990 penny does not end with the no mint mark proofs, because regular strike coins also suffered from various errors that year, such as double die obverse where the details of Lincoln's portrait or the inscriptions like, "In God We Trust," or "Liberty" appear doubled because the die shifted slightly during the hubbing process. And for collectors these doubled images are not flaws but treasures, each unique and each adding value. And then there are off-center strikes where the coin was not aligned correctly in the press, resulting in a penny that might be missing parts of the design or have a blank crescent of metal on one side. And the more dramatic the off-center, the rarer and more valuable it becomes, especially if the date is still visible, which allows identification of the year. And then there are broad strikes where the coin was struck without the collar in place, causing the metal to spread outward, giving the penny a wider and thinner appearance than normal. And these types of errors, though less dramatic than a missing mint mark, all contribute to the mystique of the 1990 cent and feed into the narrative that certain rare specimens can reach astronomical values. Another key point in the tale of the 1990 cent is how minting technology and quality control have evolved, because in theory with modern presses and automated systems mistakes should be much less frequent, but in practice the sheer volume of coins produced, billions each year, means that even a tiny fraction of errors results in thousands of error coins. And when a dramatic one like a missing mint mark slips through, it becomes instantly legendary, and in 1990 the United States Mint produced over 6.8 billion pennies across Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco facilities, meaning there was ample room for anomalies to occur, yet collectors are especially captivated when an error occurs in proof coins which are supposed to be flawless examples, and that contradiction between perfection and imperfection is part of what makes the 1990 NOS penny so fascinating and valuable. Now let us think about why collectors would assign a value as staggering as $8 million to a single coin, and this is where rarity, demand, and psychology intersect, because in the world of collectibles, especially coins, the value is not simply based on the intrinsic metal content, which in a penny is almost negligible, but rather on how rare the coin is, how desirable it is to collectors, and how much prestige is attached to owning it, and when only a few hundred exist out of billions. Struck, demand skyrockets while supply is fixed, leading to an exponential rise in value, and then speculation enters as investors bid up prices hoping to resell later at even higher levels, and before long a single coin that cost 1 cent to produce becomes the focus of multi-million-dollar transactions, auctions, and headlines, and once that happens the legend grows, inspiring more and more people to check their coin collections in hopes of finding one, which in turn feeds the market and keeps the myth alive. Another fascinating aspect of the 1990 cent story is how ordinary people have stumbled upon extraordinary coins, because there are accounts of individuals buying proof sets at yard sales or inheriting coin collections from relatives only to discover a 1990 NOS penny tucked inside, transforming a dusty old box into a multi-million-dollar treasure. And these stories spread widely because they appeal to the universal dream of finding hidden wealth in unexpected places, and every time the story of a coin fetching huge sums hits the news, a new wave of amateur collectors start looking through jars, drawers, and boxes, adding to the cultural phenomenon of treasure hunting through coins, and the 1990 cent has become one of the iconic examples fueling this fascination. Beyond the individual errors and stories, we must also appreciate how the 1990 penny reflects broader themes in history and economics, because a coin is not just currency but a symbol of its time, and in 1990 the United States was transitioning from the Cold War era into a new decade marked by economic challenges and technological change, and the penny itself, often debated as unnecessary due to inflation reducing its purchasing power, became ironically the site of immense value through mistakes, highlighting the paradox of money, that something officially worth almost nothing can through circumstances of rarity become worth millions, and that paradox is part of why people find these stories irresistible. When we analyze the possible errors that might exist in 1990 cents beyond the famous NOS proofs and known varieties, collectors speculate about other possibilities like wrong planchet errors where the cent is accidentally struck on a dime or foreign coin blank, producing a coin that is both visibly unusual in size or color and numismatically rare, and if any such 1990 wrong planchet cents exist, their value would be immense. And then there are capped die strikes where a coin sticks to the die and strikes subsequent coins leaving distorted ghost-like images, or multiple strike errors where the coin is struck more than once leading to overlapping designs, and all of these possibilities expand the universe of rare and valuable 1990 cents, feeding into the narrative that 1 cent from that year could reach valuations in the millions. The lasting legacy of the 1990 penny and its multi-million-dollar reputation is that it serves as a reminder of how important attention to detail can be, because while billions of people handle pennies without a second thought, a few sharp-eyed individuals notice the difference, recognize the rarity, and reap the rewards. And it also underscores the unpredictable nature of collecting where luck plays as much a role as knowledge, because without chance errors slipping past the mint, these coins would never exist, and without chance discoveries they might remain hidden forever, and yet once found they alter lives, creating stories that spread far and wide and inspire the next generation of collectors. Last Today we are diving deep into the remarkable story of the 1988 1-cent coin, a humble penny that has shocked collectors, historians, and treasure hunters alike, with reports of examples valued as high as $11 million because of the rare errors, unique mistakes, and once-in-a-lifetime circumstances that make it stand out in numismatic history. And as we unfold the long, winding tale of how such a simple coin minted in vast numbers could rise to such legendary status, you will discover why. This coin has captured imaginations for decades and continues to drive a frenzy among collectors worldwide who dream of finding one in a jar of spare change, in an old desk drawer, or tucked away in an attic box forgotten for years, because the magic of the 1988 penny lies not in its face value but in its potential to hold mysteries born from the minting process, mistakes in design, errors in die creation, planchet mix-ups, double strikes, misaligned dies, repunched mint marks, and even transitional elements that slipped past inspectors unnoticed at the time. And to understand why this tiny coin can be worth up to $11 million, we first need to look at the year 1988 itself in the broader context of United States coinage, when the Lincoln Memorial design was still in full swing. Copper-plated zinc planchets were the standard since 1982, and the U.S. Mint was producing billions of pennies each year at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. But with such high-speed mass production came inevitable human and mechanical errors, some of which created numismatic rarities so valuable they rival even gold coins in the marketplace, and among these the 1988 cent has gained a mythical reputation because it bridges two eras, the familiar Lincoln Memorial reverse and the impending changes in master dies that caused subtle but dramatic varieties to emerge, especially the legendary 1988 penny with the 1989 reverse, often called a transitional variety, where the obverse design of 1988 was paired accidentally with the reverse intended for 1989, leading to mismatched design details that most people would never notice unless carefully examining the font, the spacing, the style of the memorial columns, and the positioning of the designer's initials. But to a trained collector, such an error screams rarity, and those who are lucky enough to find one hold in their hands a once-in-a-generation mistake that catapulted ordinary coins into million-dollar status. And this is only one of the possible reasons behind the immense value, because the 1988 penny also hosts double dies where the date, motto, or Liberty inscription appear with faint doubling due to misalignment of dies during hubbing, and these varieties command thousands to hundreds of thousands depending on condition. But when one of these double die pennies also carries a transitional reverse error, the rarity becomes astronomical, giving rise to valuations in the multi-million-dollar range as collectors compete for ownership of what many call the holy grail of late 20th century pennies. And then there are the striking errors, such as off-center strikes where part of the design is missing and a blank crescent of planchet shows, broad strikes where the collar failed to contain the metal and the coin appears expanded, clipped planchets where the blank was improperly cut leaving a crescent-shaped bite, and even wrong planchet errors where a penny design was mistakenly struck on a dime or foreign coin blank. And these incredible mint mistakes from 1988 further add to the mystique, because when they combine with transitional reverses or double dies, the value compounds enormously, and collectors know that mint errors on transitional varieties are essentially once-in-history accidents that will never be repeated, fueling sky-high prices at auctions and private sales. And so when you hear the staggering figure of $11 million attached to a single 1988 penny, it reflects not just the face value of copper plated zinc but the convergence of multiple powerful forces: historical significance, rarity, demand, condition, and the excitement of owning a coin so unique it redefines what a cent could ever be worth. And imagine the emotional roller coaster of the person who casually checks their pocket change and stumbles upon such a coin, perhaps noticing the faint difference in the reverse design or the doubling on Liberty, not realizing at first that they hold the equivalent of a mansion or sports car in their hand disguised as a penny. And this dream has driven countless people to check their jars of coins, their bank rolls, and their inherited collections from parents and grandparents, because the possibility is very real, and history shows that great rarities are often found in the most humble of places. And beyond transitional and double die varieties, we also must consider the role of mint marks in 1988, where the Denver Mint Mark D sometimes was repunched or appears filled, creating scarce varieties that appeal to specialists, and when combined with pristine condition graded as MS68 or higher by professional grading services, the coin enters elite territory where the registry set competition among top collectors pushes prices far beyond logical levels, because in numismatics rarity plus condition equals demand, and demand plus historical story equals astronomical value. And so the 1988 penny embodies all these qualities in ways few other modern coins ever have, and the $11 million story attached to certain examples reflects the pinnacle of that collecting frenzy, where wealthy collectors are willing to pay extraordinary sums to own something no one else can. And as we explore the possibilities that make this coin so valuable, we must not forget the human side, the engravers, the mint workers, the inspectors who perhaps miss the slight differences as they rush to meet quotas, inadvertently letting history slip through their fingers, creating errors that would one day be priceless. And these mistakes, once considered embarrassing by the mint, now fuel legends that keep coin collecting alive with passion, mystery, and hope. And every time a new discovery surfaces, the news spreads like wildfire, inspiring fresh generations of collectors to search again. And that is why the 1988 penny continues to be talked about, studied, hunted, and cherished, for it symbolizes that even the smallest overlooked details can turn into monumental fortunes. And in the grand story of numismatics, this humble cent has earned its place among the giants of value. And now, as you reflect on this incredible tale, perhaps you will look more closely at the change in your pocket, the coin sitting in a dusty jar or hidden in a drawer, because you never know when you might be holding a tiny copper-plated treasure worth millions. And with that inspiring thought, we encourage you to stay connected with our journey into rare coins and treasures, because there are countless more stories to uncover, secrets to reveal, and fortunes to share. So if you enjoyed this deep dive into the unbelievable 1988 penny worth $11 million, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us for more incredible discoveries that prove history, mistakes, and chance can transform a simple coin into a legend.